Hey, I'm Adam. Let's make somewhere new. I started this project the same way I start many of them, by gluing a piece of XPS foam to a wooden base. This time, though, it's much thicker than usual because I intend to carve directly into it. This type of foam is easy to cut cleanly if you make multiple shallow passes, while keeping the blade flush against the side of the base. Styrene sheets are just as easy to work with. By scoring and snapping them, you can get very clean, straight cuts with minimal effort. To start the sword, I used a dowel rod half the diameter of my intended handle and sandwiched it between two equal-sized pieces of styrene. Once everything was lined up with tape, I sealed it together with plastic cement. Once both halves were complete, I temporarily secured everything with tape before permanently bonding it together with more plastic cement. The edges were still a little rough, so I sanded them smooth and tried to create a subtle, sharpened edge along the side of the blade. And as always, please wear a mask when sanding. You don't want any of this in your lungs. Using some craft foam, I started building up the hilt. Unlike many foam products, this material doesn't melt when exposed to Ca, aka super glue, which makes it incredibly useful. Not only does craft foam stick to itself really well, but it also adheres to almost anything. Honestly, it's a hugely underutilized material. Once I figured out the ideal handle length, I marked where it met the blade so I'd know where to begin sculpting. I used my questionable-looking, flesh-colored Super Sculpey to create the grip. First, I flattened it through my posture roller, which is very satisfying, and then wrapped it around the dowel before smoothing it onto place. I attempted initially to mimic wrapped leather. That didn't work exactly, so instead I carved grooves into the clay with a ruler to create some visual separation and texture. After that, I sculpted a thick disc and topped it off with a decorative knobby bit for the end of the pommel. I cut out more craft foam in order to both fill the gap at the hilt and to ensure that the handle would be able to sit properly inside the hollow blade without shifting. Once everything was assembled, I positioned the sword where I felt the composition worked or felt the best. My goal was to make it look as though the blade had been dragged through the landscape before finally being driven into the earth rather than simply falling straight down into it. It's funny, sometimes when I'm doing these voiceovers and looking back at my footage, I notice missed opportunities. In this case, because the world that I'm creating has floating islands, which I've yet to create, I could have had a sword sticking through an island with the end of the blade coming out the bottom of it, which I think would look pretty cool, actually. Maybe that's something I'll try in a future video. I carved away at the foam until I felt the sword sat at the right depth, and then used an excessive amount of hot glue to lock everything in place. Cork is another one of those fantastic materials that is perfect for terrain building. Because it breaks apart so naturally, it's perfect for creating fractured stone and displaced earth, and is even good in modern settings for asphalt. I used it to represent massive chunks of rock pushed upward by the force of the sword's impact. I spent a very long time arranging pieces around the blade, trying to imagine how enormous slabs of earth and stone would crack, shift, and settle after, let's call it, an event like this. Since many of these cork pieces only had small contact points, I filled the gaps with watered-down Mod Podge and used isopropyl alcohol to help it flow into the cracks. I also used Sculptamold as a terrain paste to fill in the larger gaps. That first combination shows up in almost every diorama that I make, which actually makes me wonder, would you guys be interested in a true beginner's guide to diorama building? something focused on using as few materials as possible while covering the purchases that offer the most long-term value. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. The halfway point of a video is usually where creators ask you to like and subscribe. So I'll do that now. If you're enjoying the content, please consider doing exactly that. I also have affiliate links in the description, along with a Patreon, which, at the time of this recording, has exactly 0 patrons. So if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making more videos, I would genuinely appreciate it. I started by priming everything black, and then spraying white from above to establish a zenithal highlight, especially on the sword itself. For the rocks, I relied primarily on dark-toned washes, building subtle color variation to keep the stone from feeling flat and mundane. Once those dried, I mixed 4 additional oil washes using mineral spirits and different pigments to add even more variation before tying everything together with a black oil wash. I continued experimenting with the animated, painterly style that I've been practicing recently, but this time with thinner paint and a brush with a little bit more water in it to help the transitions blend together a little bit more naturally. I followed that up with a stippling and brushing of highlights using a brighter gold and a brighter silver. A final dry brush from light gray to white gave everything the additional vibrancy it needed. Unfortunately, some of the contrast disappeared in the process, so I did something that I actually rarely do. And I applied a very selective black oil wash in the deepest shadows to restore some depth without losing my highlights. I laid down a layer of PVA glue and then gave a generous sprinkling of actual dirt from my backyard, creating a base layer for additional sand, stones, and flocking. Everything was then locked in place with the same isopropyl alcohol and Mod Podge mixture that I used before. I learned this moss technique from Jeremy at Blackmagic Craft. And by the way, if there was no Blackmagic Craft showing us very early terrain making videos, there would be no Horizons Forge, so thank you, Jeremy. Mixing flocking, glue, and water creates a paintable moss texture that dries surprisingly convincingly. I added a few grass tufts throughout the scene to break up the stonework, and finished things off with a little AK Interactive Streaking Grime to age everything a little bit further. I painted this tiny gentleman off camera and glued him into place. With that done, all that remained was painting the base black. As always, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment so we can reach more people together and help them feel like they can make somewhere new. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, please consider checking out my Patreon, as well as the affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.